Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. There has just been a magnitude 7.4 earthquake just off the southern coast of Argentina today. This occurred during a G1 geomagnetic storm brought about by a coronal hole high-speed stream, which is linked to these sort of giant earthquakes via the long-term historic record of data that we have. Now, that data is not that long in terms of the geologic time scale, but going back since the advent of the space age, when we've had these measurements of coronal holes, and since we've had a really good worldwide seismic network, we've noticed this connection between coronal hole high-speed stream impacts and really big earthquakes like we had just now. We're going to dive into that connection with this video. We're going to talk about this earthquake, whether we should be concerned about more high magnitude earthquakes coming up because there's another very large coronal hole that will be reappearing for its 9th rotation fairly soon. That'll be around May 15th or 17th. It'll be geo-effective the same day that we have a Uranus-Cazimi. And so I've been forecasting that data out now for a bit more than a month, but this is the biggest earthquake that we've had since the magnitude 7.7 in Myanmar, Burma back on March 28th. So mayhem has begun. Boom shakalaka, 7.4. We will have, let's look at our a news article here by the AP. No damage reported after the 7.4 has struck, and thankfully, you know, there was a tsunami watch that was put out, but thankfully it doesn't seem that's really been all that big of a concern. It is in a fairly low populated, way down near the South Pole. And actually, we're going to talk about the energetic dynamics of that, how that perhaps was a cooperating factor in kind of triggering that fault, which was already clearly max stressed out, to then rupture. You know, if you're going to have an earthquake rupture because of perhaps space weather influences, it already has to be locked and loaded. So you're not taking a fault that has no energy on it and causing it to rupture with a big earthquake. It already has to be locked and loaded, and then this can be the straw that breaks the camel's back. That's kind of the idea, the domino effect. One small domino can tip over latent potential energy, which is that big domino. So the AP is saying that there's basically no damage or casualties initially reported, and the USGS says that the epicenter was 219 kilometers down. Now, okay, yeah, so it was, okay, 219 kilometers south of Ushuaia. I'm sorry, folks, but the southern tip of Argentina. Originally, I thought they were talking about the depth on that earthquake, but if we go to our USGS latest earthquake map, we see this seismic burst that's now starting here because of this magnitude 7.4, and we don't have a depth on that yet, or at least they say it's 10 kilometers. That is the default value that they use for earthquakes at times. If they can't get a good depth measurement, they'll use the default of 10 kilometers, but there's also a lot of earthquakes that occur around that depth. So 10 kilometers down, it's kind of a low resolution look at the depth. And the deeper an earthquake, the less likely it is to generate a tsunami. So shallow ones can generate pretty significant tsunamis, especially big earthquakes like this, a magnitude 7.4. But we see a whole bunch of other ones having popped off nearby. If you look at our largest magnitudes, we see 5.7 there. That's from that. 5.6 as well, 5.4. So those are all aftershocks. It's the 7.4 that's the big one, and typically the largest aftershock that you'll get will be 1 magnitude less. Though sometimes that will dissipate out with a whole bunch of lower magnitude earthquakes like we're seeing here, 5.7, 5.6, 5.5. You get a whole bunch of those instead of perhaps a 6.4 or 6.7. But we very well could have a big aftershock in that magnitude 6 range from this earthquake later today, or perhaps over the next 48 hours or so. So that is live right now. This happened actually, you know, I woke up at like 5:45 a.m. today, and I did a live stream last night on the geomagnetic storm. Perhaps you already watched that. We're going to go over into some of that space weather information as well. We'll review it again today. But I woke up kind of early. I was like, why did I wake up so early? And I checked the earthquake map like 2 minutes before this earthquake popped off. So then I didn't see it again for like 90 minutes. But maybe I woke up because these energies are kind of building. An earthquake like this can have global energetic effects. We can actually zoom over all the way to our space observing system. This is out of Tomsk, Russia. And I mentioned a live stream I did late last night. Last night we actually looked at this, and there are some unusual energy signals that are in here. They're not the most dramatic or biggest by far, but I did make a note on yesterday's live stream that there were some anomalies in our background vertical electric field as measured in Tomsk, Russia, and that is typically linked to pre-earthquake signals. Specifically the range here, we see some of these anomalies there. They're kind of spread out. I'm not going to do a complete recap of that. It's on yesterday's live stream. It's also timestamped, so you can check that out. But, well, we had those anomalous signals, and then boom, magnitude 7.4. But let's check out these space weather conditions that trigger this. It seems there's at least a lot of research supporting this, and well, it lines up perfectly. So you can make up your own assessment whether it's coincidence or not. I personally do not think it's coincidence. Having tracked this stuff for a while now, having read the research, it definitely does not seem like coincidence to me, but that is up for you to determine. Let us check this out. We have our sun going all the way back to like March 19th or so. So here's March 19th. We see just this coronal hole there, but then check out this huge coronal hole that developed there. And here up top, we have our global seismic activity, cumulative magnitude, okay? And so green is low to moderate activity. Well, actually gray there is low activity. Green is moderate, yellow is high, red is very high, and this dark burgundy is extreme. Okay, so just kind of watch that in the background. I'll try not to block. I'll keep myself right here. All right, let me go back. This is March 19th. You'll notice again, we had very just like low moderate activity. Then earthquake activity started to pick up as this monster coronal hole rotated into view. And as it went geoeffective right here, we see that we had this global seismic burst defined primarily by that magnitude 7.7 earthquake in Myanmar, Burma, 6.7 aftershock, 2 other magnitude 6s that day. We then had a magnitude 7 in Tonga, 6.9, some other magnitude 6s. As the coronal holes basically faded out and we only had just some tiny little ones, earthquake activity started to subside, as you can see. But then we had rotation number 8 of that monster coronal hole, and I think it actually got a little larger, though it spread out more laterally and to the south. And so we'll see that start to form up right around here. We also had some pretty big solar storms launch our way. Here's rotation number 8 of that coronal hole. We have rotation number 9 coming up. We don't know what's going to look like, but it's likely to be fairly similar to last time. I think this actually got even larger. Here's rotation number 8. Some of that high-speed stream did miss us because it was going south of the ecliptic plane, but we see some up there to the north. We do see seismic activities did increase a little bit, in general staying elevated over where it was here before. And then we had these coronal holes rotate into the geoeffective position last night, giving us a G1 geomagnetic storm, and boom, there is our magnitude 7.4 earthquake in Argentina. So that is the state of the solar system, the energetics that you can say right now. There's also planetary resonances that are active. We have a big, really beautiful, but pretty powerful planetary geometry that's going to click into effect on May 17th. We also have a very dynamic full moon coming up. I believe that's May 12th. And that is that's going to be working with Uranus, and this planetary geometry on the 17th is also working with Uranus, which is a planet of dynamic change, electricity, and also earthquakes. So just a quick note on that. So I think that we're going to see this seismic activity continue all the way through the next geoeffective rotation of this coronal hole here. This is rotation 7. We forward up. There's rotation number 8. I think it's likely to be similar in size. Maybe it diminishes a bit. Maybe it gets even bigger. But what we see is that the biggest earthquakes usually happen, like the giant earthquakes, magnitude 8.5 plus, almost always have a big coronal hole in the geoeffective position right here. And they usually occur after multiple rotations of that coronal hole and its high-speed stream because it causes an energetic loading. And so that is able to more quickly load faults up with energy. Seems like there's some interesting plasma dynamics at play with this, and then you get the rupture. So let us look at an interesting dynamic here. Well, first we'll go to our real-time solar wind. Let me show you this. We're in a geomagnetic storm right now, and this is for our past 3 days. We see that our activity was active back before the storm really rolled in. Here we have the highest value being a 5.33, so just a G1 storm. The rating goes to 5. G5 would be a severe, like a really intense storm. I think they call it an extreme storm. Severe is G4, extreme is G5. We had that back last May 2024, so it's about 1 year coming up now soon. But we see our interplanetary magnetic field got stronger. We see it's actually enhancing right now. It's about 13 nanotesla, so about 2.5 times stronger than normal. And the southward component's kind of oscillating. This red line there, when it goes negative, it connects to Earth's magnetic field. But we see that we entered into the high-speed stream because initially you get this increase in density, like here, right? Going up to 20, 25 particles per cubic centimeter. Then as the high-speed stream starts to come in, solar wind velocity goes up. We see that with our measurement there, going up to 600 kilometers per second. That's the high-speed stream. And the density drops. So we've been talking about this on the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel or you're new here, hello and welcome. We've been looking at this connection between solar activity and earthquakes. In general, on the channel, we look at what's happening with the Earth energetically via different geologic events and geophysical events, but we also examine solar activity, space weather, planetary resonances, cosmic influences, and more. And right now, we seem to really be in this period with this dynamic connection between space weather and earthquakes. And then when there's another focus somewhere else, that's what we focus on. We're more concerned about what's happening energetically on the planet right now. So subscribe if you'd like to stay up to date with that. But we see that the density drops. So we've been discussing that. It seems that these big earthquakes are more common when the solar wind density is low. And don't have an exact explanation for that. This is, anything that is just like a simple absolute is usually missing a lot of nuance and detail. So keep that in mind. So I'm not making any bold claims here, but there does seem to be some sort of like kind of osmotic effect where when you have low solar wind density and you have a fault that's at a high stress, that can cause the energy loaded on the fault to actually basically shoot up and enter into the plasmasphere. Whereas before, that higher density solar wind maybe keeps it kind of compressed down in the deeper geophysical layers. Plasma is very vibrational. We see, like, for example, ball lightning, this weird atmospheric phenomena. It's basically like it's called ball lightning. Lightning is plasma. That will shoot up to the atmosphere. We see earthquake lights before earthquakes, especially when it's dark out. You don't see them during the day because you have a lot of sunlight. You can't see the plasma, but at night, you'll see these flashing lights. That's plasma being emitted from a fault. We know that faults are at critical stress can actually generate plasma, but there's also this effect of if you have these enhanced currents that are being generated perhaps from a geomagnetic storm, like right now, that could also maybe stimulate the flow of plasma in the lithosphere and cause it to then basically shoot up, and that could cause a fault to rupture. That's an interesting idea, one that resonates with me. May not be 100% true, but I think there's something to it. And let us look at our aurora real time because we have a bit more information to kind of flesh out this idea. So we're going to look at the southern hemisphere because that is where this occurred. And the time for that earthquake, that magnitude 7.4, was at 12:55 universal time, okay? So we see this burst of energy come in right there. That's the G1 storm. Really starting to take effect. It is nighttime. It's nighttime because that earthquake was right about there. It's nighttime, okay? So we see that part of the world got a big burst of energy right there. This is creating ionospheric currents which induce geomagnetic currents in the ground surface, and so effectively you're having more electric energy run over any of these faults in that zone, just flowing through the earth in that zone. But then you'll notice we have all of a sudden sunrise, right? This is the daylight side, that's the nighttime side. So now it's sunrise, you have dawn. And if we look at our time here, it's 11, and now it is 12. And we go forward a bit more, now it is 12:55 universal time right there. So that earthquake occurred right after dawn. Right after dawn. And what that means is that as the sun is hitting the earth, it's creating these stronger ionospheric currents. And those basically turn on when you have sunrise, and then they turn off at sunset. And so you have a decharged state relative to daytime at night, decharged energetic state. But what happened here is that this part of the globe received a burst of energy when normally it's decharged because of that geomagnetic storm. See that, right? We see that energy come in exactly in this zone, right? It's gonna bleed out like this the further away you get from this auroral ring and the magnetic pole. We had that burst of energy at night, kind of perhaps loading some of those stressed faults with energy. And then we did have the normal daily influence of solar energy come in via these ionospheric currents. And right after the sun started to rise over the area, that's when we had that earthquake. So let's now move on to our next graphic to kind of explain this more. Well, actually, because we have this one loaded up, let's look at this one really quick. So we have this coronal hole high-speed stream. This is low density, high velocity. It just swept by the Earth here, okay? So this is what just happened. We're still in this high-speed stream. First, we had that high-density plasma shock from the CIR. That's that burst of aurora that we just saw in our last model, right? That increase. And now we're in this high-speed stream, which is low density, which seems to be able to kind of pull this energy out of the Earth. And I think it's a plasma mechanism. But again, there's a lot of research that we need to do into this. And this is still very new science, but it makes a lot of sense because it's a fairly comprehensive explanation for a lot of different phenomena. And that's typically the more elegant something is and explains a lot of things, usually the more true it is. So. But we had this high-speed stream impact. That's what's happening right now. We're at the tail end of that, it seems. But we are back in G1 storming at this moment in time. But check out this other graphic that I have for you, okay? We can go here. We're going to check out the electrodynamics in the polar regions during like a geomagnetic storm. You kind of always have these dynamics in effect because there's always solar wind flowing into the poles, but it gets strengthened when you have a solar storm impact, all right? So there we go. So here is our dusk side, and we're looking at the North Pole here, but you can just flip this around for the South Pole if you want. It'll be slightly different, but basically it's the same. For the purpose of this, this educational lesson, it's fine. We have dusk here, we have dawn there. We have these currents that flow here. We have a whole bunch of different electric currents and magnetic field dynamics, but we see these currents there, okay? And then we have these cross polar cap currents. We have these Hall currents, but notice how these are all kind of going towards the night side, all right? But again, the Earth is rotating. So you have dawn right there, you have dusk right there, and you have some of these currents going off in this direction on the downward side. And so as the Earth rotates, the part that is the sun is rising to, right, dawn is going to experience these strengthened electrodynamics, especially if it's in the polar region, right? Especially if it's in the polar regions, which this earthquake did occur right in that polar region, south of Argentina, just north of Antarctica. And so these sort of currents are very strong, especially during a geomagnetic storm. And that is a little bit more in-depth explanation as to that aurora graphic that we saw. But we have these constantly flowing. And so it just went through nighttime side where you have these two currents loading up the Earth with energy in the polar regions on the night side. And then we get that ionospheric enhancement due to the sun with sunrise, and boom, we had that earthquake. And we've seen that dynamic before. A really clear example was back last year with a very large earthquake in Kamchatka. I believe that was August. But the earthquake ruptured right at the same time you had this sort of dynamic at play. It was like either dawn or dusk with that earthquake. So that does seem to be a factor. Here we have our total electron content map. This is our GLOTEC model. And I just want to show you this because again, that earthquake popped off during basically right after dawn. So right about here, we see our time right there. This is when the earthquake happened, 12:55. It was 12:58 universal time. And so we see that the ionosphere wasn't especially charged up, but it was starting to become charged up. See how it was dark blue, the lowest total electron content right there. Here's our legend, okay? So low TEC, high TEC of the ionosphere. The more electrons, the stronger the charge, basically. And we're looking at like the total electron content through a vertical profile of the ionosphere. So it went just from decharge, though this isn't showing, again, that enhancement of energy from the storm. And then right there, it started to charge up because we started to get sunrise in that zone. But we're still at a point where the dominant, strong telluric currents of the ionosphere aren't sweeping over that area. But the change was pretty dramatic, you could say. Here's our 10 days of geomagnetic activity. And we're looking at this via the HB60 index. And so we see that we were in low activity here. I mean, back on the 23rd, 24th of April, there were some periods where it raised up a little bit with these yellow colors. This is a measure of swings in Earth's magnetic field strength measured via a global observatory of magnetometers spread out around the globe. They compiled this into an HB60 index, a 1-hour resolution of overall geomagnetic volatility. And green is low activity and yellow is heightened activity, though it can also go into red and it can really get up there. This can go to 9 and beyond. But we see this really clear ramp up in activity up to 5. That's that G1 storm right now at this moment in time. When we're still in that. We look at our interactive map for this earthquake. We can see how that energy kind of broadcasted out. And again, it was to the south of Argentina. So it doesn't seem that too many people were affected. Thankfully, it was not in a main populated area or anything like that. South of Chile and Argentina, I guess there's actually more Chile than Argentina, but maybe Argentina owned some of these islands. I don't know. But regardless, right in that polar cap area, because if you go back to our Google Earth and we really zoom out, we kind of get this set up, right? Here is our Earth. And Dubstep Kid, thank you so much for extremely generous super thanks. That is awesome. You are incredible. God bless you, and much love and abundance to you, my friend. Incredible. Thank you so much. Here's our Earth. Here's the Earth, nice and round. And we see this earthquake occurring very close to our South Pole, right? This is definitely in a very high latitude region where those geomagnetic currents are the strongest. So this was not up. Google Earth can sometimes be funny. It was not up well in these mid-latitude or equatorial regions. That was very close to the South Pole, which means that these geomagnetic dynamics from a geomagnetic storm are very strong, because again, you have those currents flowing really like in this area right there. So that's just what I wanted to show you with that. And here's our global seismic activity. I showed that with the coronal hole graphic, but we can really zoom in. Since we saw the coronal holes, we know that since that really big coronal hole appeared with rotation number 7 back around March 24th, we started to get more earthquakes, and now we've had this magnitude 7.4. So a lot of activity as compared to earlier in the year. This is a magnitude 7.6 just southwest of the Cayman Islands. That was early February. There was also a magnitude 7 very beginning of January, but all the data from that earthquake to this one was also just in the low to moderate zone. This is like a 3-month running graphic, but we see the pretty marked shift in activity. The global seismic burst continues. And I've been tracking this now for, I guess, about 6-7 weeks now. I mean, we talked about this for a long time on the channel, years now, but in terms of this increase of seismicity across the globe, we've been talking about this for about 6-7 weeks. We've been on an earthquake watch since the 7th rotation of that coronal hole, but really I made a very clear announcement of, hey, earthquake watch with the 8th rotation of that coronal hole right in this zone there, and now we have that 7.4. So there is definitely something to this. Mainstream science needs to catch up. Eventually, the people that don't think there's a connection, they'll die off, and the rest of everyone else will get on board. That's kind of what it'll be. I wanted to check our magnetic field observatory near this earthquake. So we have one for the Falkland Islands, which is very close by. And so let's look at what our magnetic field has been doing during this time frame. And we'll go back to 27th of April. We'll check out the past 6 days of data. We see normal magnetic field conditions going back to 27th of April. Here are diurnal variations. Okay, that's from those enhanced ionosphere currents generated by the sun on the sunlit side, right? So for this part of the world, the diurnal variation is a dip. It's a dip in the strength of Earth's magnetic field. And we're looking at 4 different components here. So we have this is the X component, this is the Y component, the Z component, and then this is the total magnetic field altogether, which is the F component, you could say. But we see here normal low variations in Earth's magnetic field. We get this drop, that's the diurnal rhythm, diurnal rhythm, diurnal rhythm. Then the storm comes in, and look at how Earth's magnetic field strength starts to become much more volatile and chaotic. And the swings get a lot bigger. Because here, this is maybe like a 40 nanotesla swing maximum or so, but now all of a sudden you get a much bigger drop. So that is what's occurred just over the past 24 hours. We see that maybe even going back 36 hours, this geomagnetic volatility started to go up. And if we zoom into today, just for today, let's look at our data. And here we have just for today, and we'll go right to 12:55 Universal Time. It's kind of difficult for me to see this. I hope that's the right. We want to zoom over right over Mesa. That's 12 right there. So this is 13. This is right when our earthquake occurred. And we notice that it's interesting. We do kind of see all of a sudden a drop in the X component right after that earthquake occurs. There is some data linking changes to Earth's magnetic field strength to big earthquakes, but typically the variations aren't that big. So I'm not saying that this is due to that earthquake, but we've seen things like that before. So in general though, if we look at our total field strength, we don't see any significant variation from that earthquake specifically, because we are in a geomagnetic storm. That's by far the dominant thing that we're seeing here. But anyone that just in general wants to check Earth's magnetic field and like what it's actually doing and the strength of it and variations across time, you can go to Intermagnet, and this data goes back decades. You can see how Earth's magnetic field strength is varied across that time frame, and so you can track the changes, and it's a very useful resource for anyone that's interested in Earth's magnetic field. I also have a 5-hour video playlist on Earth's magnetic field going in depth on it. So I'll link that in the video description. I highly recommend you watch that if you're interested in what's been happening with Earth's magnetic field. So that is basically what's been happening, is this magnitude 7.4 earthquake popping off today. Boom shakalaka, really kind of popping out of nowhere. But we were expecting some big earthquakes, and now we've had them. And now the question is, are we going to have some big solar storms head our way? That is definitely very possible. We see a very large sunspot group right there. Talked about that yesterday in the live stream. It has been growing a little bit. It's already large though, growing a little bit and also becoming much stronger in its magnetic field. And that will soon be in this Earth center direct bullseye zone in about 3 days now. Around March 5th, it's going to be right here. So on the 5.5 portal. We will have that sunspot right in that zone, fairly close to the equator. If that was to give us a big coronal mass ejection, that is almost certainly going to hit Earth. But as of right now, it hasn't been flaring that much in the past 48 hours or so. So that is a good thing. We can look at our X-ray flux for the past 7 days just to get a sense of the type of solar flares we've been having. We had a little spurt of them, and let me fix this up for you guys. We had a spurt of them back at the end of April, as you can see here, when 4079, that big sunspot group, just rotated into view. But since then, things have cooled off. So as of right now, the biggest space weather influence is that coronal hole high-speed stream, but big solar flares are certainly possible. We have a probability of X-class flares of about 5% today. M-class flares is higher, but in general, that sunspot has been fairly quiet since it kind of announced its arrival. And we'll see if that continues, but it is looking pretty big and fairly strong. We can check out our latest magnetogram. It has evolved since we showed this on the live stream yesterday. And so if we go here and just zoom this over for you guys, we see that the magnetic polarity in these two spots are really, really strong. And the magnetic polarity here in this negative region, this is positive, this is negative. It's also been strengthening and getting larger as well. But these are really strong magnetic polarities. And we've seen big solar storms launch from even just single cores like this without all this extra stuff, okay? Like we saw a really big X-class flare from just a single core on the sun a few months ago. I don't remember exactly when. But it was a sunspot. It was bigger than this, but effectively it looked like that. It was just a single core, and all of a sudden it was totally quiet, and then all of a sudden, boom, shakalaka. It just went nuts. So that is possible. And this one has two cores there. It already has all this positive or negative polarity near it. And if we even start to get perhaps some negative polarity push up and grow in between these two positive polarity cores, that could get wild. We do see some mixing occurring over here already. And if we get some positive polarity start growing over here a bit more, and we see some mixing there, all those sort of things could really make this sunspot a bit more dynamic and unstable. But it's a big sunspot, and that is what we have in front of us as it relates to space weather, because if we go back to our sun, we'll notice that after this coronal hole high-speed stream, we don't have anything super apparent on the horizon. So we can look here. These just went geoeffective. Again, that's what gave us this G1 storm, the high-speed stream impact, solar wind density dropped. That's right when we had this magnitude 7.4 earthquake in Argentina. And now we are seeing a new coronal hole appear there, the southern hemisphere. But it's just kind of a thin tendril. We see the sunspot, but in general, nothing super in front of us. There is one more thing that I wanted to point out. I'm glad I thought of this now. Is we can look at our daily sunspots, because we do see this connection between sunspot numbers and earthquakes. And when sunspot numbers go down, we seem to have more earthquakes and bigger earthquakes. And lo and behold, check out our sunspot number. It's actually dropped down to about 40. So let me zoom over here. We actually just hit a peak of about 200, even higher than the last one back there at the beginning of April. This is the end of April, and now we've plummeted down to about 40 or so. It's maybe about 44, 43. I could look at the exact number, but it's less than 50. Much steeper drop than this time. And lo and behold, magnitude 7.4 earthquake today. And so I'll update my data graphic that I have showing this correlation between global seismic energy release and sunspot numbers to account for this. I don't have that data right now up to date, but we know that a magnitude 7.4 earthquake releases a lot more energy than a magnitude 6 earthquake, or a whole slew of magnitude 5s, because you go up one magnitude, you go up 32 times in the energy output. So magnitude 7.4 earthquake is some of the strongest energy release that we've had for a while. Actually, we can find that on our volcano discovery page here. It should be, yeah, check this out. Here we go, it's perfect. This effectively does it. It doesn't show sunspot numbers, but you can fill in the blanks, okay? And I'll position myself right here. Here's when this global seismic burst started. From coronal hole rotation number 7, the big guy, Big Daddy. Then we had rotation 8 around here. but look how earthquake activity has stayed elevated. But check out how it's gone up with these magnitude 7 earthquakes. Here we have our combined seismic energy for all earthquakes globally, magnitude 4 and greater. This is a daily measure, and we're measuring this with a scale that's kind of logarithmic. So we have 1 gigawatt hour there, then it goes to 1 terawatt hour. That's 1,000 times more energy. So going from here to there is a big deal, okay? So you may see this spike and think, oh, it's only going up one line, but that's an order of magnitude going from 10 gigawatt hours to 100 gigawatt hours of energy released globally for the day. Most of that energy is going to be defined by the strongest earthquake of that day, so long it's significant enough magnitude difference from the rest of them. This is the magnitude 7.6 in the Cayman Islands. You can see how that global energy release spiked because of that single earthquake. You can see how the global energy spiked because of that magnitude 7.7 with Myanmar, but there was also a 6.7, a 6.6, a 6.1 on that day that all added to that. Now we're back up to a very high zone there, over 2 terawatt hours, whereas the day before we were only at 10 gigawatt hours. So we go 10 to 100, and so we have 200 times more energy released seismically today versus yesterday. And perhaps you've been feeling that. There's already all these health connections, bioelectric connections between ourselves and the Earth. This overlap between geophysics and biophysics, and when there's a geomagnetic storm, you may find yourself just being a little bit more awake and alive and energized, and you may not sleep as much or not sleep as well. And also earthquakes seem to have a biophysical effect too. I've personally have felt that back with the magnitude 7.8 and 7.5 in Turkey. I was nearby in Egypt. I won't go into the full story, but I certainly felt that earthquake. The timing is, I've talked about it on the channel before. I find it interesting that I woke up like 10 minutes before this earthquake popped off in Argentina, which was early for me. Not super early for me, but definitely early for me to wake up at 5:40 a.m. Whereas normally I'm waking up about 6:50 or 7 a.m., maybe 6:30 a.m. So interesting connections between health and geophysical events, solar energy, space weather, and more. I talked about that on the channel. I have a playlist talking about the health effects of electromagnetic fields and more. So you can go to my playlist tab if you want to learn more about that, like 3+ hours of content specifically on the connection between space weather, geomagnetic storms, EMFs, and our health, our wellness, our bioelectricity, and more. We're going to check this visualization one more time to see if we have our model that they create showing the seismic energy propagate through. They don't. So I think that is effectively it for right now, but we will go take some questions now. A bunch of super thanks have already come in, so thank you for everyone that's contributed to the live stream with a super thanks. That is awesome. And of course, anyone here that's live right now for watching, hello and welcome. Again, I've been your host, Stefan Burns, and we'll start with the super thanks questions, but if you have a question, then you can ask it as well with @Stefan Burns. Just type that in so I can see your question, and I'll do my best to answer that. We'll roll through a few of these. And Anthony's asking, could this be the reason why the oceans are hot? In general, the energy of the Earth, there's a whole bunch of latent energy with the Earth. There's a lot of dynamics already at play. And so certainly if you were to flip the sun off, with you were God, you had a light switch for the sun, and you turned it off, the Earth would become cold and dark pretty quick. And so fundamentally all the energy was loaded into the Earth from first the accretion of the Earth from that like interplanetary, interstellar dust, right? The leftover dust from perhaps a supernova or something. We don't really know exactly, but the Earth, formed, we think, from this accretionary disk that has a lot of energy to it. There is like uranium and stuff deep in the core, perhaps a georeactor that's feeding energy overall into the planet. But if you turn the sun off, Earth goes cold and dark. But there's this reservoir of heat and energy in general. The amount of energy now coming in as it relates to like the inflow of energy for that overall energy system is quite small. So it is responsible in large part for like building up that energy reservoir. But in terms of like space weather dynamically influencing the oceans to become really, really hot, that's a bit more tenuous. We do see connections between weather and space weather. And of course, we see connections between what's happening with the sun and climate. But in terms of like why the oceans are hot, I think it's more to do with a lot of anthropogenic factors, as well as the fact that we're in a grand solar maximum. If we're talking long-term climate trends. And of course, yeah, just again, Dubstep Kid, thank you so much for that incredibly generous super thanks. That is awesome. Ashley saying, thank you for sharing your light. Thank you so much, Ashley, for the super thanks. God bless. And we have 4,444 subs or viewers right now in the live stream, which is awesome. And we have a question here from Dr. Gonzo saying, saying, we've been seeing many plasma orbs at night here in Wilkes County, Georgia since last year. Every night, if it's not cloudy, have a couple phone videos on YouTube. Interesting. Yeah. We know that there are things like ball lightning, and it's likely that ball lightning and these sort of other energetic phenomena that occur in our atmosphere are more likely during solar maxima. And now, everyone has a cell phone basically. So I think these sort of sightings are probably becoming more common as a result of that. And therefore, there could be more sightings of plasma and ball lightning. And in fact, I can show you an interesting video I have of that. Here we have our little plasmoid. See that? Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so these things exist, right? We have good videos of them. And so thank you to Andrew for sharing this with us. He said that we could show this on the channel if we wanted to. And the next one though is really cool because we really see the background nicely and it's slowed down even more. Yeah, so there is still magic on this planet. There's still magic on this planet. That is some really cool stuff. So if you're seeing things in the night sky, first off, check to see if it's a plane or not. Check to see if it's a star. And be mindful of the fact that there could be little specks of light, little specks of dust floating in front of your camera, creating these like artifacts that look like something on your phone. But I'm not going to discount if someone's seen perhaps a plasmoid. It's definitely possible. So thank you for the super thanks. And then we have a comment here from Illuminati saying, love your content and the technical talk. Do you know any new or developing models that help us interpret how space weather affects the Earth? In general, I'd just say I think that the plasma model is probably the one that's the most exciting because it really seems to explain things nicely without needing all this complex technical understanding and a lot of gaps still in our knowledge. The plasma model seems to be really kind of spot on with allowing us to understand this from a more holistic perspective. And not just like space weather earthquakes, but also perhaps volcanoes and weather and more. So that seems to be, that's the direction I'm doing my research into because it seems to be the most accurate. Thank you, Jimmy, for the super thanks. That's awesome. And Marie is asking me to do, she's saying do a collaboration with Ann Tucker. Please, please, please. So thank you for the super thanks. I have a video with Pam Gregory on her channel. You go watch that. And so I know she's a fan with Ann, so maybe we'll do a collab at some point. BOOMSHAKALAKA from Miss Lulu. Thank you so much for the super thanks. And Tricky, thank you so much as well for the super thanks. Appreciate your analysis of events. And we have a new question here from Zukon, which is, do you know if there is an artificial intelligence somewhere that is gathering all this data and highlighting correlations? We actually just had an interesting article published, and I can go here to show it, on the effect of planetary geometry and earthquakes that use artificial intelligence. So people are starting to do this. Here's this article. I haven't read it yet. I haven't been able to get access to the paper. I just learned of the paper yesterday and I bookmarked it. So I'm not making any statements as to the quality of this paper or what they presented, but just to answer kind of your question, artificial intelligence for assessing the planet's positions as a precursor to earthquake events. There are people that are starting to leverage artificial intelligence and its ability to crunch a whole bunch of numbers as it relates to some of these more as of before misunderstood scientific domains, because a lot of people just immediately wrote off any connection between planetary geometry and earthquakes, though if you look into it, the research is pretty compelling. Like the data is really compelling in my opinion. more people are starting to do that now, which is awesome. And so now we'll take some questions from the rest of the audience, or if you do a super thanks as well, I'll answer that question first, just because that's fair. But Mick is asking, where can we access that global ionosphere graphic and data? So I'll show you really quickly how to get there. You go to the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center. You can just type that in on Google, and then you will want to go to products and data, and you'll look for, under models, GlowTech. And so you just click that, and that'll pop up your different GlowTech models right here. There are other ones that are available as well. There's one from the Australian Space Weather Center, which is right here. So you can remember that URL. But I think the GlowTech model is better. Though this one does allow you to look at, for example, the percentages from yesterday, like the differences and the actual megahertz readings. And so this one's useful as well. But I think the GlowTech model in general is just a little bit more accurate. And Frog World is saying, how many sunspots are there currently? We just checked that out, but here it is again. We have right now about 45 sunspots or so, maybe 44, 45. And Anthony is asking, thank you for super thanks. He's asking, what do you think about Dr. Stephen Greer on sky objects? Well, to keep it fairly simple, I think he may be a little bit of a charlatan. You just kind of, I get some sort of weird feeling about him. I've never met the guy. I've just seen some of his interviews before. And there's reports out there that with his program where he go out in the desert and call in these UFOs, there's reports that they've also like launched flares. Like he has like a team that's like far away on the other side of the desert plain that's like launching these flares to make people think that they saw something. So I don't know. I really don't have any strong opinion on it, but I just get kind of heebie-jeebies from the guy. I wish everyone well, but I think there's, in general, I think there's a lot of charlatans in this space. In general, I think there's a ton of charlatans in the UAP space. People that have capitalized on a little bit of notoriety and they're making what they do of it, but I've seen a UFO. It was very bizarre, but I think probably most of those people are just milking the public. So, yeah, I mean, the New Jersey thing, there was some weird stuff that was occurring, but a lot of those sightings were of planes, of like Venus, because she was an evening star. Then also a lot of the videos were like clearly AI generated. So I think that was just kind of one of these like, it wasn't totally fake news. There was some weird stuff, but it was also definitely just like one of these kind of public psychosis moments a little bit. Heebie-jeebies. And Martha's asking, can we theoretically have infinite energy from this? It's an interesting idea. We have the ionosphere up above the surface, 250,000 volts typically, though it can get enhanced during a geomagnetic storm. And that's a lot of volts, right? If you could plug into that, then you could have a lot of energy at your disposal. But no, infinite energy, not so much, because you don't want to decharge the ionosphere. How do you actually get that energy? Is a totally different question. You need some way to actually pull it in. The closest thing we have to infinite energy would be like vast solar arrays out in space, like just converting actual light photons directly into energy or like electricity would be probably the most effective way, other than like, let's say, thorium reactors, which do require, material. So yeah. This is very true, and some people may think that of me. I just do my best to report on what's happening honestly, and also be open to new ideas. That's why I look into all these things, and to kind of be hopefully a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of science, where reality actually is versus where science thinks it is. Because there's always a delay with science. For example, like back in 2018, 2019, 2020, I was doing a lot of research into fasting and gut health and the microbiome. And there was very few research papers on the effect of fasting, basically not eating anything, on your microbiome, how it modulates the population, causes pathogens to die off, and allows symbionts to flourish better because they're more hardy and able to adapt to change. And I wrote some articles on the connection between fasting and the microbiome just based on my own experience with longer fasts, 28 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours. And some people are like, there's no science to support this. Well, now there's a whole bunch of articles and research that's been done on the connection between fasting and the microbiome. They just weren't looking there yet. Like, that's really going to be mainstream knowledge in like 10 years, 15 years. It's just the same with probiotics or any of this stuff. There's always a delay to it. So you have to kind of be ahead of the curve and do your own research if you want to be up to date with the reality of the situation, like the true reality of the situation. Did you notice the serious atmospheric disturbance directly over the New Madrid seismic zone at the time of this quake? I think you're saying the New Madrid seismic zone. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by NSSZ, but no, I did not see that disturbance. I'm not sure what you're talking about. What do you mean by atmospheric disturbance? Do you mean like ionospheric total electron content? Hard to say. Yeah, Eagle Scout with Eagle Dreams. That's right. Yeah, so there has been a blackout in Bali today. So we can look into that really quick. There was a good comment that someone posted on the channel going in depth on that. But let's type in Bali blackout and see what sort of news articles we get. I don't want to click on CNN. How about the Bali sun? And I've been to Bali. It's a nice place. You have to be ready when you go there, though. It has a very special energy to it. And some people, it's not for them. Other people, it's definitely for them. So Bali has been plunged into darkness as a total power outage has hit the province at 4 p.m. on Friday, May 2nd. The vacation hotspot lost all connectivity. While backup generators have been activated in some areas and mobile signal remains strong, residents and tourists are being warned that normal service could be some time before it resumes. Currently, recovery is being carried out, and looks like electricity has been restored back to 50%. So that's good. But the comment that someone left was that there was an undersea power cable running from, I think, one of the bigger islands, maybe Java, that had some sort of disturbance, and then that caused the island of Bali to have a blackout. So whether that was related to geomagnetic activity or not, I can't say. I would need to look into it more. But in general, Bali's in a pretty low latitude area. So it's not in these areas that experience the strongest geomagnetically induced currents. But I think just in general with these power outages, it's kind of like the universe wanting us to be aware of the fact that sometimes the power does go out. To be aware of that. It can happen. And to be prepared for that. Have an FM radio, have food and water on hand. It's a good thing to do. Yeah, and they've not yet issued statements regarding the blackout, government officials. And I could perhaps find that comment, but it'd be kind of a journey to do it. So we're going to continue on with the question and answer. Melissa is saying, it drives me nuts because I think a lot of strange earthly phenomena can be explained by your videos. Everything from the paranormal to the extraterrestrial, just follow the energy currents. Yeah, I mean, the plasma cosmology and the holographic universe really explains effectively all this stuff very nicely. And you don't need these really wacko theories or aliens or something to explain it. Personally, I already think that there are, other consciousnesses or other conscious entities in the solar system, that they are just in a more high vibrational existence or dimension. And so that is what I think. That's up for everyone else to, think about and determine for themselves. But in terms of like aliens flying in on ships, I think that's a very materialistic view of the universe. And I think we have to expand to a more higher dimensional, energetic understanding of the universe to kind of think about how higher life forms would look. But that's just my own thoughts and beliefs on that. And here's a good one too by Trev saying magnetic fields don't crack, they equalize. Yeah, one of the common headlines that comes out from these sort of solar storm impacts or, you know, geomagnetic storms, whatever, is that Earth's magnetic field has formed a crack and now we're in a storm. And I really dislike that because, yeah, like you can have magnetic ducts through the magnetic field, basically like through the ionosphere. You can have these zones where the magnetic field is weaker or in general allows this flow of charge, but you don't literally have Earth's magnetic field like cracking open. It just doesn't give the right visualization. It's not an accurate visualization as to what occurs. Because then people think that like it's cracking and then the magnetic field is like flinging off and never to come back and all of a sudden the world's going to collapse or something. Like there's a whole bunch of people that are really afraid of this, and it's just based off of a lot of, in many ways, like poor metaphors to explain what's happening. So yeah, thanks Trev for that comment there. Anna's saying, does space weather affect our sleep? She's wondering, and yeah, there's quite a bit of anecdotal evidence for that. There's probably some research out there too, but you'd have to type that in on Google Scholar, maybe like space weather and sleep or solar activity and sleep, geomagnetic storms and sleep. But certainly anecdotally, I know that effect is true. I mean, I had less sleep today. I woke up early, went to bed fairly late because of the live stream I did last night. And so many people in the comments will say that. So take all those anecdotes and compile them together and you start to get a clear picture of it. Now they are anecdotes, but in general, I would say a lot of scientists are too dismissive of anecdotes. And actually the best scientists typically start by examining anecdotes and then seeing if there's something to them. So just because something is an anecdote doesn't mean you dismiss it. The same as these correlation versus causation people. A lot of them will just be immediately dismissive of any causative effect because of the correlation. They'll be like, oh, it's just a correlation. It's like, well, you're of course going to have a correlation if it's causative. So just because it's correlation doesn't mean it's causative. Like there's this interesting kind of psychology of some people just immediately dismissing things saying, oh, it's non-causative, it's only a correlation. It's like, well, that's the first step to being a causative thing, is that it has to be a correlation. So just kind of one of my lamenting some of the current things, psychologies of science right now. But we can go to our atmospheric map here, not that button, this button. And we'll click on the United States here and we will set this for, let's do 96 frames. And here's the big storm, severe weather alert for the United States. Looks like that's running right over the New Madrid region. We do know that storm quakes are a thing. And atmospheric disturbances have been shown to sometimes trigger earthquakes. That's possible, but it's a fairly low percentage thing. It's not like if it was a high percentage thing, you know, 100% causative, then every single storm would trigger earthquakes all around the globe all the time. And we just don't see that. But again, if a fault is at a critical stress threshold and you have sufficient dynamics in place, then perhaps a severe weather system can trigger something to rupture if the electrodynamics are there for that. Basically with a fault, with an earthquake fault, it's what's going to trigger it. Is it just going to be enough strain accumulates that eventually just overloads and slips? Is it going to be you have the fault right there and then you get a tidal effect from the moon? Let's say during a full moon, that causes it to slip. That's about 0.5 to 1% of the time we see that effect. Though that is a higher percentage with these high magnitude earthquakes. Is it going to be perhaps some space weather, which like the fault is already nearly there and then that just tips it over, right? These are all the things that you have to kind of consider. It's not it's multifactorial. So it's really, you have to look at it very keenly and with an open perspective and not just zone in on one absolute thing and get like kind of stuck with that. There is one more thing I want to do. I just remembered. So question and answer is over, but we will, well, I just want to make sure I didn't miss any. Well, I have a couple more questions here. Okay. We'll finish up the questions with our super thanks, and then we're going to get into a I Ching on these coronal holes. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to sign off. And actually, this is the one I need to address first. Will solar storms affect planes in the sky? If it's a really severe solar storm impact, like really severe, that could perhaps affect airplanes. But it's a bit of an unknown. We're not seeing, we've had some big solar storm impacts and we weren't seeing planes drop out of the sky like crazy. But we also haven't had really a Carrington impact during all this modern age of air travel. So if there was like a Carrington level solar storm impact, how would that affect planes? I don't know. I think in general, they'd probably be fine, but we don't know. It's kind of an unknown. Or like a Miyake event, if that occurred, I don't know. I think that you'd probably see some issues with electronics though, for sure. GPS at a minimum, but also you can get really deep charging during really big solar storm impacts. Perhaps that just overloads a plane and causes it to malfunction. It's a possibility, but we haven't really seen that effect. Divine Eye is saying, remember to ground, hydrate, meditate, and pray. Her husband ended his life on April 1st. So sorry to hear that, Divine Eye, and we're sending all our thoughts and prayers to you, and may he rest in peace. He is now at rest and he is at peace. He is on the other side. So our thoughts and blessings and prayers are with you, Divine Eye. Thank you so much for the super thanks. Another extremely generous super thanks from Dubstep Kid. Awesome, bro. That is incredible. So thank you for your incredible generosity. And in general, just a reminder that if you donate with a super thanks, YouTube takes 30%. So if you are someone that really wants to do a larger donation to the channel, I have a PayPal link on the channel page. So you go to my main channel page, and you click links, and you'll see paypal.me/wildfreeorganic. And so PayPal doesn't take 30%. But thank you so much for your incredible generosity. And we have War Ranch asking, did Intel for the US government for many years, a lot of money has been spent on the study of consciousness, let that sink in. Yeah, we have all the experiments that they did with like MK Ultra back in the 70s and even before that, 60s, and psychedelics, and they for sure are still doing a lot of that research. So yeah, the US government and some of these kind of black agencies have done a lot of research into that, and we don't exactly know everything that they've done. There's also a lot of misinformation in that space, unfortunately, which kind of makes the whole picture and view kind of cloudy. But we know they've been doing stuff like that. And Marie is asking, won't radio frequencies potentially be down too? My brother built a radio tower in his backyard, and he says solar flares impact radio signals. They do, yeah. Solar flares actually release these radio frequency emissions. And so you get what's known as a radio burst. There's different types, type 2, type 4, things like this. And so, yeah, it affects radio communication. And also we see changes to low frequency, high frequency communication, like ham radio operators. They like solar maximum, but if you get, let's say, a solar flare impact, charge up the ionosphere, that can cause radio degradation across certain frequencies. It also affects, that happens during radiation storms, geomagnetic storms as well. And the Celestial Cheerleader is saying, thank you so much for your recent video on the super thanks. I learned so much, that's awesome. I have a whole playlist on the Schumann resonances. So yeah, you can check that out. But the recent video I did on the Schumann resonances is like an hour long. It's like a master guide on that. So if you want to learn more about them, then you can check that out. And that's one of our main pathways, the connection between us and the Earth geophysically and space weather and more. So I want to do this I Ching though. I just kind of want to get a sense of what may be in store for us as it relates to this 9th rotation of this coronal hole right here. Because we've had now a 7.6, 7.4 earthquake, the magnitude 7 in Tonga, some 6.9s, the 6.7 recently. Yeah, the 6.8, 6.7 that I covered south of New Zealand. Yeah, 6.8. So let's do a I Ching reading and maybe get a little bit of a clue as to what rotation number 9 is going to bring. That is going to be on the Uranus Cazimi. On May 17th, it'll go geo-effective if it still exists, and I think it will. When we saw it rotate out of the far side, out of view with stereo A, it still was there, very, very big. So So an I Ching is a method of Chinese divination. You basically take some coins, you flip them, and that gives you a what's called a hexagram. You create 6 lines. They can be either yin lines or yang lines, and as a result of that, you then get one of 64 answers according to this ancient book of divination. It's like 2,500 years old or more, and they always seem to be very, very poignant. So we'll do that. So our question will be, what will the 9th rotation of this coronal hole bring? What will rotation 9 of this coronal hole be? And we'll flip our coins. We have a yin line, and that's 2 tails and a heads. So we have our first line, a yin line. This coin dropped, but we'll see what it is. It's a heads. So we have now a yang line above it. That's line number 2. And we have another yang line above that. You get 6 of these. Oh God, I'm dropping these coins. Another heads and a tails for this one. So that's another yang line. Okay. And another yang line. Okay. Let's see what this next one is. This is going to be exciting. Oh, yang line, okay. I was expecting a different result, but 5 yang lines and 1 yin line, none of them are changing lines, which is very interesting. So this will be interesting. This is going to be fun. Okay, let's find it. And let me go over to our screen capture. Yeah. Position myself. We're looking for 5 straight lines up top and a broken line on the bottom. That is what we're looking for. I'm sure you guys will probably find it before I do. But it shouldn't be too hard to find because it's a fairly obvious hexagram. Coming, number 44. Coming to meet. Heaven over wood. So heaven over wind. And this is number 44. And we have heaven over wind / wood. Okay, let's read it. We don't have to do any interpretation on this beyond just the image and the judgment. Coming to meet the maiden is powerful. One should not marry such a maiden. Okay. Under heaven, wind, the image of coming to meet. Thus does the prince act when disseminating his commands and proclaiming them to the 4 quarters of heaven. We can go down here to our comments. This hexagram indicates a situation in which the principle of darkness, after having been eliminated, furtively and unexpectedly obtrudes again from within and below. That's kind of interesting if you think about earthquakes, right? That feminine principle is the earth coming up from below unexpectedly. You know, just initial observations here. Of its own accord, the female principle comes to meet the male principle. And heaven is representative of space and sky, right? It is an unfavorable and dangerous situation, and we must understand and promptly prevent the possible consequences. It's linked to the 5th month, June to July, because at summer solstice, the principle of darkness gradually becomes ascendant again. It's interesting. The judgment. The rise of the inferior element is pictured here in the image of a bold girl who lightly surrenders herself and thus seizes power. The weakness of men, you could say. This would not be possible if the strong and light-giving element had not in turn come halfway. The inferior thing seems so harmless and inviting that a man delights in it. It looks so small and weak that he imagines he may dally with it and come to no harm. The inferior man rises only because the superior man does not regard him as dangerous and so lends him power. If he were resisted from the first, he would never gain influence. The time of coming to meet is important in still another way. Although as a general rule, the weak should not come to meet the strong, there are times when this has great significance. When heaven and earth come to meet each other, all creatures prosper. When a prince and his official come to meet each other, the world is put into order. It is necessary for elements predestined to be joined and mutually dependent to come to meet one another halfway. but the coming together must be free of dishonest ulterior motives, otherwise harm will result. Yeah, just kind of interesting about how it's talking about the Yin principle, which is related to earth element, coming up to meet all the very strong heaven elements from up above. We're asked about what are we going to see from coronal hole rotation number 9. And this is definitely a heaven element with the fact that it's emitting a high-speed stream and enhancing the solar wind. It's been there for a while. It's very, very strong. We're already seeing this in long duration global seismic burst as a result of this. That is at least what the research indicates and what I believe and what I share on the channel. Though again, do your own research and make your own assumptions on this, your own decisions on this. But this I Ching number 44 saying that there's going to be some sort of earth element rising up to then meet the strong heaven element, which sounds exactly like an earthquake. So that is for rotation number 9. We'll see what happens. No strong proclamations or anything or predictions on that, but an interesting I Ching reading. So yeah, that is the last thing I wanted to do in the live stream. Just going to make sure there's no more super thanks to answer here. There's one more from War Ranch. Direct energy weapons took out Malaysian flight MH370. It's not only radar, a high energy direct energy weapon can do that. So I'm not sharing my thoughts or opinions on that, but thank you for the super thanks, dude. And yeah, that's definitely a whole mystery. MH370, what happened to the plane? It's a big mystery. But I don't think it got teleported by flying orbs. That's a fake video. I've done a lot of research into that, and it's pretty easy to debunk. But that's, again, do your own research. So thank you all so much for being here. I hope you found this video useful. We'll keep an eye on what's coming as it relates to space weather and Earth geophysics. If you'd like to stay updated, then please subscribe to the channel. I release videos almost daily. Also, an announcement that if you become a channel member, there is a new podcast that I'm releasing called the Earth Evolution Podcast. There will be new podcast episodes for that every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday that will range about 10 to 20 minutes in length. That will summarize a lot of the topics that I cover on the channel into a more concise and also conversational summarized format, which is excellent. This is an amazing podcast. It's generated using Notebook LM. So it is an AI podcast, but it's fantastic. I've been making them, listening to myself. I really enjoy them. And so I'm sharing that with all the channel members at this moment in time. They are ad-free. So if you'd like to get access to that, the Earth Evolution podcast, which is, again, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, a really good way to kind of stay up to date on this information, learn to a better degree, a deeper level, then please sign up as a channel member. You just go to my main channel page, and right next to subscribe is a button that says join, and you get access to that at the lowest tier, Soul Tribe, which I think is $3 a month. So that is an excellent thing to do if you're really into this stuff. You'll love that Earth Evolution podcast. The first episode's already out. Episode 2 I'll push out on Monday, because we have this live stream today. We had a live stream last night. Maybe it's a little bit too much content to release today. But the next episode will come out on Monday. And so if you'd like to get access to that, then you can do so by signing up as a channel member. And again, I have holistic wellness products available for you at wildfreeorganic.com, earthing shoes, tea blends, and more. I have a whole bunch of online products too. I have a holistic gut health guide ebook, and there's also the planetary resonances e-course. So if you want to understand how the planets affect us, the Earth and society in general, 15 hours of video content going through all the planets, different objects in the solar system, astrological ages, the gray year, cosmic cycles, precession of the equinoxes, synodic cycles, Venus star cycle, the moon. It goes in depth on everything. 15 hours presented by me directly. You'll love that. You can sign up at wildfreeorganic.com/planetary-resonances. So again, thank you all so much. Wishing all of you well. Keep your head up. Take care of yourselves. I'll see you all very, very soon.